A racist cop targets a black woman at a quiet gas station, throwing his authority around and escalating tensions, until he discovers she's not just anyone. She's a highly trained Secret Service agent on a critical mission. What unfolds next is a gripping tale of confrontation, redemption, and the fight for accountability. From reckless power plays to life-threatening danger, this story uncovers the truth about ego, prejudice, and what it takes to change. Stay tuned as we delve into this shocking and thought-provoking journey, and don't forget to share where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss the inspiring stories we have lined up. The gas station sat in eerie silence under the cold embrace of a midnight sky. Amanda Carter pulled her sleek black sedan into the lot, the purr of the engine fading as she parked by the pump. She stepped out, her casual hoodie and jeans disguising the sharpness in her movements. A woman of commanding presence, Amanda exuded an aura that demanded attention without asking for it. Beneath her composed exterior lay the instincts of a seasoned Secret Service agent. Amanda scanned the area briefly. Two parked cars, both empty, and a cashier inside glued to his phone. Routine. Yet her training told her the most dangerous situations often masqueraded as mundane. She began to pump gas, her every move deliberate but unassuming. This wasn't just another night. It was her first reprieve after weeks of grueling operations. Across the lot, Luke Harris lounged in his patrol car. The engine hummed softly as he tapped the steering wheel absent-mindedly, hoping for something to break the monotony of his shift. His eyes narrowed when Amanda's car pulled in. The vehicle, pristine and undeniably expensive, immediately caught his attention. Harris watched as Amanda stepped out. Her calm, confident demeanor irritated him. In his mind, she didn't belong here, an outsider, too composed for someone passing through this forgotten stretch of town. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the wheel as he mentally constructed scenarios to justify his growing suspicion. "She's too comfortable," he muttered to himself. "What's she hiding?" Amanda moved toward the convenience store after refueling, her stride measured and unhurried. She passed through the automatic doors, heading straight for the drink cooler. Through the glass reflection, she caught Harris's patrol car creeping closer to the station entrance. She didn't turn her head. Years of experience had taught her that the moment you acknowledged unwanted attention, you gave it power. Inside his car, Harris leaned forward, his eyes locked onto her every move. He knew nothing about this woman, but her confidence, her apparent lack of deference, gnawed at him. It wasn't just the car or her air of authority, it was her. "She's hiding something," he convinced himself, his pulse quickening. Amanda grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar. She approached the counter and placed them down with a nod. The cashier barely acknowledged her, his focus still on his phone. Harris stepped out of his car, his boots crunching against the gravel. Amanda noticed the sound but didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly retrieved her wallet and handed the cashier a bill. Harris approached the store, his posture rigid, his presence commanding. The door's chime announced his entry. Amanda's peripheral vision tracked him as he moved toward the shelves, feigning interest in the items but keeping her in his sights. The cashier looked up, sensing the tension. Harris's deliberate movements seemed less about shopping and more about intimidation. Amanda turned toward the exit, her water and snack in hand, but Harris stepped into her path. "Evening," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made it clear this wasn't a greeting. Amanda met his gaze without hesitation. "Evening, officer." Her tone was neutral, unassuming, yet laced with quiet authority. "What brings you out here tonight?" Harris pressed, his arms crossing as he leaned slightly forward, attempting to assert dominance. Amanda held up the bag in her hand. "Getting gas," she replied plainly. "And now, I'm heading out." Harris's jaw tightened. He didn't like her calmness. It felt like a challenge. "This isn't the kind of place people just pass through," he said, his tone sharpening. "You sure there's nothing else you're here for?" Amanda raised an eyebrow, her patience thinning. "Just passing through," she repeated. Harris stepped closer, invading her personal space. "What kind of work you in?" he asked, his eyes scanning her casually worn clothes and straight posture. Amanda didn't answer immediately, her gaze steady. "Something that keeps me busy," she said finally, brushing past him toward the door. "Hold on a second," Harris barked, blocking her way again. "Got some ID on you?" Amanda paused, turning slightly to meet his glare. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "Do I look like I'm breaking any laws, officer?" she asked, her voice steady, a subtle challenge slipping through. Harris bristled, his hand resting on his belt. "You look like someone who thinks they can walk into my town without explaining themselves," he shot back. Amanda's lips pressed into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't aware fueling my car required an explanation. For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them thickened, the air charged with unspoken hostility. Harris stared at her, trying to unnerve her with his authority, but Amanda stood firm. Finally, Harris stepped aside, but the glare in his eyes spoke volumes. Amanda exited the store and headed toward her car, placing the bag on the passenger seat before sliding behind the wheel. She started the engine but didn't drive off immediately. Through the rearview mirror, she saw Harris standing outside, his gaze burning into her. Harris's mind raced. She was too calm, too composed, and she had no business being here. To him, that meant she was hiding something. Amanda pulled out of the gas station, her car's taillights fading into the night. Harris returned to his patrol car, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. "This isn't over," he muttered, throwing the car into gear. Harris flicked on his headlights and began to follow her, convinced he would uncover whatever she was trying to hide. Harris stood at the center of the gas station lot, his chest puffed out as Amanda exited the convenience store. With deliberate steps, he closed the distance, intercepting her path as she moved toward her car. "Hold it right there," he commanded, his voice sharp and firm. Amanda stopped mid-step, her expression neutral but focused. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her tone professional, yet nonchalant. "You tell me," Harris replied, his eyes narrowing. "You're out here in the middle of nowhere, driving a car that doesn't exactly scream local. Mind explaining what you're doing in my town?" Amanda didn't flinch. "I stopped for gas. Nothing more, nothing less," she said simply, her gaze unwavering. Harris's lips twitched with irritation. "Gas, huh? And where are you headed in such a hurry?" "Back on the road," Amanda replied without missing a beat. She sidestepped to continue toward her vehicle, but Harris shifted, blocking her way again. "Let's see some ID," he said, the demand leaving no room for refusal. Amanda paused, exhaling slowly as she reached into her pocket. She retrieved her license and handed it to him, her movements calm and measured. "Here, take a good look." Harris examined the card with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping it over as if searching for discrepancies. When none appeared, his frustration deepened. He handed it back abruptly. "Your car. Open the trunk," he said, jerking his chin toward the sleek sedan. Amanda folded her arms, her tone hardening. "Unless you have probable cause or a warrant, I'm under no obligation to comply with that request." Harris's jaw tightened. "Refusing to cooperate doesn't exactly make you look innocent," he shot back. "Innocent of what?" Amanda challenged, her calm facade unshaken. "Stopping at a gas station? Driving a decent car? Or does it have more to do with me not fitting the picture you had in mind?" The directness of her words made Harris's face flush. He took a step closer, his hand hovering near his belt. "Watch your tone," he warned. Amanda didn't back down. "I've complied with everything required of me, officer. But if you're planning to escalate this further, I suggest you tread carefully." Harris's radio crackled to life, and he snatched it up, speaking into it with a sharp edge. "Unit 7 requesting backup at the Route 12 gas station. I have a situation." He clipped the radio back to his belt and smirked at Amanda. "Backup?" she asked, a trace of incredulity in her voice. "Let's see if you're still so confident when more eyes are on you," Harris replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. Before Amanda could respond, a low rumble filled the air. Harris frowned and turned toward the sound. Moments later, several black SUVs appeared at the edge of the lot, their headlights slicing through the darkness. They rolled in smoothly, positioning themselves in a precise formation that surrounded Harris and Amanda. The patrol officer's confidence faltered. "What the?" he muttered under his breath. The doors of the SUVs opened in unison, and several individuals dressed in plain black tactical gear stepped out, their movements sharp and deliberate. Harris instinctively reached for his belt but stopped short when one of the figures, a tall man with a commanding presence, approached. "Agent Carter," the man said, his voice low and authoritative. Amanda gave him a small nod. "Agent Reeves," she acknowledged, her tone calm and professional. Reeves turned his attention to Harris, his expression unreadable. "Officer," he said with a clipped tone, "is there an issue here?" Harris blinked, trying to regain composure. "Who are you people?" he asked, his voice losing its earlier bite. Reeves reached into his pocket and produced a badge, flashing it briefly before speaking. "United States Secret Service. This is a federal matter now." Harris bristled, his confusion quickly morphing into indignation. "Federal matter? I'm the law here, and I have the right to investigate suspicious activity in my jurisdiction." Reeves took a step closer, his voice icy. "Not anymore. Stand down." Harris opened his mouth to argue, but Amanda stepped forward, cutting him off. "Officer Harris," she said, her tone steady and sharp, "you've made your point. Continuing this will only make things worse for you." "Worse?" Harris scoffed, his bravado resurfacing. Lady, I don't take orders from you. Reeves didn't flinch. This is your last warning, officer. Step away. The finality in Reeves's tone caused Harris to hesitate. His hand twitched near his belt, but he took a step back, glaring at Amanda as if trying to reclaim some sense of authority. Amanda didn't give him another glance as she moved toward her car. The SUVs began to pull away, their engines humming in unison. Harris stood rigid, his fists clenched tightly as the vehicles disappeared into the night. He turned back to his patrol car, his face flushed with frustration. Whatever just happened, it had left him seething. They're not walking away from this, he muttered to himself, climbing into his car and gripping the wheel tightly. Not without answers. Harris, his pride wounded and determination burning, started the engine and began to tail Amanda, certain he'd regain control. Amanda Carter's car glided onto the dark highway, her hands steady on the wheel. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching the unmistakable glare of headlights tailing her. She adjusted her posture, her mind switching into tactical mode. Harris was following her. She pressed a discreet button on her dashboard, activating a built-in device that scrambled tracking signals. The display lit up briefly, indicating that her car was now undetectable to basic police scanners. However, she knew Harris wouldn't give up so easily. Behind her, Harris's patrol car accelerated. His focus was razor sharp, his irritation boiling into determination. "You're not getting away," he muttered under his breath, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Amanda turned off the main road, guiding her car down a narrower, winding route through the countryside. The sharp bends and uneven terrain required precise control, but she navigated effortlessly, her instincts sharp. Harris followed, his tires screeching as he tried to match her maneuvers. One particularly tight turn sent his car skidding dangerously close to the edge of the road. Gravel sprang into the air. Harris cursed under his breath, regaining control. "Damn it!" he growled, slamming the accelerator. Amanda noted his persistence in her rearview mirror. Without hesitation, she activated another switch on her dashboard. A small beacon on the back of her car emitted a blinding flash of light, forcing Harris to shield his eyes momentarily. His car wobbled, but he quickly adjusted, teeth clenched in frustration. "Is that how you want to play it?" Harris muttered. He picked up his radio, barking into it. "Unit 7 in pursuit of a black sedan heading west on Route 48. Drivers attempting to evade." The response crackled back. "Unit 7, return to patrol. This doesn't sound like a priority." "Negative," Harris snapped. "This is priority. I've got a suspicious individual who refused to comply. Backup requested." "Hold your position," the dispatcher replied firmly. "You're acting without clearance." Harris growled, slamming the radio back onto its mount. "To hell with clearance," he muttered. He wasn't about to let Amanda slip away. Amanda glanced at her rear view again, her mind racing. She knew Harris's persistence could escalate the situation. With a sharp breath, she decided to end the chase on her terms. Up ahead, the road split into two lanes before merging again. Amanda timed her next move carefully. She swerved into the left lane, allowing Harris to gain ground, then veered sharply back to the right, cutting across his path and forcing him to brake hard. His car fishtailed, tires squealing as he struggled to regain control. The maneuver bought Amanda a few precious seconds. She pressed another button, sending a decoy signal to Harris's onboard system. His dashboard suddenly lit up with conflicting directions, sending him off course. Harris slammed the dashboard in frustration. "Not happening," he growled, ignoring the interference and focusing solely on Amanda's taillights. The highway stretched into a more secluded area, the dense tree line on either side casting long shadows across the pavement. Amanda knew her team was monitoring the situation remotely. She tapped a hidden comms device in her ear. "This is Agent Carter," she said quietly but firmly. "I have a tail. Uncooperative local law enforcement. Need intervention." "Roger that, Agent Carter. Hold position," a voice responded. Meanwhile, Harris's car closed the distance. He had managed to override the decoy signal and was now pushing his vehicle to its limits. His lights flashed, the siren wailing as he signaled for Amanda to pull over. "Pull over!" Harris barked into his loudspeaker. "You're only making this harder on yourself." Amanda remained calm, her grip on the wheel steady. She let him close in, knowing her backup was moments away. Then out of nowhere, the unmistakable roar of multiple engines echoed through the night. Harris's eyes darted to his side mirror just in time to see a convoy of black SUVs speeding onto the highway. "What the?" Harris muttered, his grip tightening on the wheel. The SUVs moved with precision, two vehicles flanking Amanda's car, while a third overtook Harris and blocked his path. The sudden maneuver forced Harris to slam on his brakes, his car skidding to a halt. The SUVs boxed Amanda in but maintained a controlled pace, ensuring she wasn't in immediate danger. Meanwhile, Harris's patrol car idled several yards behind, its flashing lights casting an eerie glow over the scene. Harris threw his car into park, fury boiling over as he grabbed his radio again. "What the hell is going on? I need immediate backup," the dispatcher responded tersely. "Unit 7, stand down. Your pursuit is unauthorized. Return to your post." Ignoring the order, Harris stepped out of his vehicle, slamming the door behind him. His boots crunched against the asphalt as he stormed toward the convoy. One of the SUVs stopped, its door opening smoothly. A tall man in tactical gear stepped out, his expression unreadable. He intercepted Harris before he could get any closer. "Officer," the man said, his voice calm but firm, "this is a federal operation. You're advised to cease your pursuit immediately." Harris squared his shoulders, his hand resting on his belt. "You've got no authority to tell me what to do," he shot back. "I'm in the middle of an active investigation." The agent raised an eyebrow. "An investigation?" he asked dryly. "Following a civilian without probable cause doesn't count as an investigation." Harris took a step forward, his posture confrontational. "That woman is hiding something. I have every right to know what's going on here." The agent didn't flinch. "Your right ends where federal jurisdiction begins," he said evenly. "Step back, now." The tension between them was palpable. Harris glanced past the agent toward Amanda, who was calmly exiting her vehicle under the watchful eyes of the other agents. Her expression was unreadable, but her composure only fueled Harris's frustration. "Enough of this!" Harris barked, moving to push past the agent. In an instant, the agent's hand shot out, gripping Harris's arm firmly but without excessive force. "Don't make this worse for yourself," the agent warned, his tone icy. Harris froze, his jaw tightening as the reality of his situation began to sink in. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and clearly out of his depth. Amanda approached calmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Officer Harris," she said, her tone measured, "this is where you let it go." Harris glared at her, his pride still burning. "You don't get to call the shots," he spat. "I'm not calling anything," Amanda replied. "They are." She gestured subtly toward the agents surrounding them. The lead agent released Harris's arm and stepped back. "Return to your vehicle," he said. "This ends here," but Harris's fist remained clenched. He watched as Amanda climbed back into her car and the SUVs repositioned themselves. The convoy began to pull away, leaving Harris standing alone in the middle of the empty highway. He felt his humiliation twisting into something sharper. "This isn't over," he muttered, returning to his car, his eyes fixed on Amanda's retreating taillights. He revved the engine, ready to follow again. Harris started his car once more, his determination renewed. He wasn't done chasing answers or Amanda. Harris's patrol car screeched to a halt, cutting across the black SUVs, blocking their path. He stepped out, his hand resting on his holster, his frustration boiling over. "I've had enough of this game," Harris barked, his voice echoing in the still night. "Pop the trunk, open that case, or you're not going anywhere." Amanda Carter remained seated in her car, her expression calm as she watched through the rearview mirror. One of the agents stepped forward, cutting a stark figure against the flashing lights of Harris's patrol car. "Officer," the agent said firmly, his voice level, "you're obstructing a federal operation. Stand down immediately." "I'm not standing down," Harris snapped, his hand tightening on his holster. "I've got every right to investigate suspicious activity in my jurisdiction. And this," he gestured sharply toward Amanda's car and the black case on the seat, "doesn't add up. Open it now, or I will." The agent's eyes narrowed. "You're dangerously close to making a mistake you can't take back." Harris wasn't listening. He took a step forward, his other hand extending toward Amanda's car. "Enough warnings. Either you cooperate, or I escalate this." The agent's reaction was swift and precise. In a blur of movement, he closed the distance, his hand striking Harris's wrist with enough force to dislodge his grip on the holster. The gun remained secured, but Harris staggered, momentarily stunned by the speed of the response. "You're done," the agent said coldly, standing his ground as Harris glared at him, his chest heaving with anger. "Walk away now." But Harris wasn't backing down. Regaining his balance, he reached for his radio, his fingers fumbling to switch it on. "Unit 7 requesting immediate backup," he shouted into the device. "Federal agents interfering with local law enforcement. Need all available units now." The crackle of a response came through, hesitant. "Unit 7, confirm the nature of the request. This could escalate. Just send them, Harris roared, slamming the radio back into its mount. Inside Amanda's car, her calm exterior remained unshaken. She tapped her earpiece, speaking quietly. We've got a problem, she said. He's calling reinforcements. Containment priority? Affirmative, came the response. The lead agent nodded toward his team. Two more agents stepped forward, moving in tandem with the precision of a well-rehearsed drill. One agent positioned himself near Harris's car, cutting off any potential escape, while the other approached Harris directly. You've left us no choice, the lead agent said, his tone measured but unyielding. You're now being detained for obstruction. Harris's face turned red with fury. Detained? You can't do that. You've given us every reason, the agent replied. Stand down, or we'll make this harder than it needs to be. Before Harris could respond, the agent behind him acted. In a fluid motion, he disarmed Harris, unclipping his holstered weapon and securing it safely. Another agent placed a firm hand on Harris's shoulder, guiding him toward the side of the road. Get your hands off me, Harris shouted, trying to twist out of their grip. Officer Harris, you've lost control of the situation, the lead agent said. Comply now, or face additional charges. Harris's radio crackled again, the dispatcher's voice cutting through the commotion. Unit 7, we've received multiple reports of unidentified vehicles in your area. Be advised, possible threat inbound. The words hung in the air like a ticking bomb. Harris stopped struggling, his eyes flicking toward the dark stretch of highway ahead. The agents exchanged brief glances, their focus sharpening. What's that supposed to mean? Harris demanded, his voice laced with both anger and unease. As if on cue, the distant rumble of engines grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable glare of approaching headlights. Amanda stepped out of her car, her movements deliberate as she surveyed the new development. They're not here for you, Harris, she said coolly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The convoy of SUVs adjusted positions, forming a defensive line as the headlights grew brighter. 3 large trucks barreled down the road, their engines roaring like thunder. Unidentified vehicles inbound, one of the agents confirmed over the radio. Potential hostiles. Prepare for engagement. Harris stared in disbelief. What the hell is going on? Amanda glanced at him, her voice calm but firm. Exactly what I warned you about. You're out of your depth. The truck skidded to a halt just meters away, their doors swinging open as several men dressed in dark tactical gear spilled out. They moved with purpose, weapons visible, their intent unmistakable. Hold your ground, the lead agent ordered his team, drawing his sidearm. One of the men from the truck stepped forward, a smirk on his face as he surveyed the scene. Looks like we've got a party here, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. You've got something we want, and we're not leaving without it. Amanda stepped forward, placing herself between the agents and Harris. This is your only warning, she said, her tone icy. Turn around and leave, or face the consequences. The man laughed, raising a hand to signal his crew. I don't think so. The first shot rang out, shattering the tense standoff and plunging the scene into chaos. As gunfire erupted, the agents moved into formation, shielding Amanda and preparing to neutralize the attackers. Harris, caught in the crossfire, found himself woefully unprepared for what was coming next. The truck screeched to a halt in a semicircle, their powerful engines rumbling as armed men poured out, each carrying automatic rifles and tactical gear. The leader, a tall man with a cold demeanor, pointed toward the black SUVs and barked orders. Take the case, he commanded. Now! The attackers moved with precision. One of them lobbed a smoke grenade into the center of the convoy, the canister hissing as thick clouds billowed out, obscuring visibility. A second grenade followed, exploding into a concussive roar that sent dust and debris flying. Take cover, shouted Agent Reeves, his voice cutting through the chaos. Amanda Carter didn't hesitate. Positions, she barked, signaling the agents to spread out and form a defensive perimeter. She ducked behind her vehicle, her weapon drawn, and immediately scanned for threats through the dissipating smoke. The first shots erupted, tracer rounds streaking through the dark. The attackers fired in bursts, pinning the agents down behind their vehicles. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal and asphalt. Amanda tapped the comm in her ear. Deploy countermeasures. Do not let them reach the case. Copy, Reeves replied. One of the agents activated a device mounted on the SUV's roof. It emitted a high-pitched frequency, scrambling the attacker's communications. Meanwhile, Amanda pulled out a handheld EMP device and threw it toward one of the trucks. The device exploded with a pulse of energy, frying the vehicle's electronics and plunging it into silence. The attackers adapted quickly. Two of them flanked the SUVs, firing suppressive rounds to keep the agents pinned. Another threw a second smoke grenade, using the cover to advance closer. Harris, crouched behind his patrol car, was wide-eyed and frozen. He had never been in a firefight, and the chaos around him was overwhelming. His shaking hands fumbled as he tried to draw his sidearm, but he barely managed to grip it properly. "Officer Harris, move!" Amanda shouted as bullets zipped past his position. He didn't respond, too stunned to act. Amanda gritted her teeth and bolted from her cover, sprinting toward Harris as rounds peppered the ground around her. Sliding behind the patrol car, she grabbed his shoulder. "You're going to get yourself killed," she snapped, pulling him down lower. "They're everywhere," Harris stammered, his voice trembling. "Stay here, do not move," Amanda ordered, her voice firm. She grabbed the back of his vest and half dragged, half pulled him toward the nearest SUV. Bullets pinged off the vehicle as they reached cover. Harris collapsed against the side, gasping for air. Amanda leaned out just enough to fire a series of precise shots, hitting one of the attackers who had gotten too close. The man crumpled to the ground, his weapon clattering beside him. Reeves joined her, crouching beside the SUV. "We've got three pushing toward the case," he reported. Amanda nodded. "I'll flank. Cover me." Without waiting for confirmation, she darted toward a second SUV, keeping low as bullets whizzed over her head. Reeves provided covering fire, forcing the attackers to momentarily retreat. Amanda reached her position and spotted two of the attackers crouched near the back of her car. They were attempting to breach the vehicle to access the black case inside. She steadied her breathing, took aim, and fired twice. Both attackers dropped before they could react. "Clear on my side," she called out. The leader of the attackers stepped forward, flanked by two heavily armed men. He raised a hand, signaling a temporary ceasefire. "Stand down, agents," he bellowed. "Hand over the case, and we'll let you walk away." Amanda stepped out of cover, her weapon still raised. "Not going to happen," she said coldly. The leader smirked. "You're outnumbered and you're outgunned. Do the math." Amanda didn't waver. "You've already lost. Stand down while you still have a chance." The leader's expression darkened. He nodded to his men, and the firefight resumed with renewed intensity. As the chaos escalated, Amanda realized the leader was moving in closer, signaling he wasn't done yet. The air crackled with gunfire as the attackers intensified their assault. The leader of the group, a towering man with a cold, calculating demeanor, stepped forward from behind one of the trucks. His voice boomed over the chaos, commanding his men with precision. "Push forward. Take out the agents and secure that case," he barked, his tone sharp and unyielding. The attackers redoubled their efforts, focusing their fire on the SUVs, where Amanda and her team were pinned. Bullets ricocheted off metal and shattered glass, forcing the agents to remain behind cover. Amanda's gaze locked on the leader as he moved with purpose toward the center of the fray. His presence was like a rallying point for the attackers, their aggression increasing under his orders. She knew that taking him out would disrupt their momentum. "We need to neutralize the leader," Amanda said into her comms. "He's the linchpin." Reeves's voice crackled back. "Understood, but he's well protected. What's the play?" "I'll draw him out," Amanda replied, already making her move. Without waiting for approval, she darted from her position, moving swiftly between cover. The leader spotted her immediately, his cold eyes narrowing as he pointed her out. "Focus on her!" he shouted to his men. Amanda weaved through the hail of bullets, her movements fluid and precise. She reached a position close to the leader, ducking behind a wrecked vehicle. "Running out of places to hide," the leader taunted, stepping closer. His rifle was aimed steadily at the vehicle, shielding her. "Why don't you come out and make this easy?" Amanda's voice called back, calm and cutting. "Why don't you put that gun down and settle this face to face?" The leader chuckled darkly. "You're brave. Stupid, but brave." He gestured for his men to hold their fire and stepped forward. Tossing his rifle aside, he cracked his knuckles and smirked. All right, let's see what you got. Amanda emerged from behind the wreck, her stance already set. You'll regret that, she said flatly. The leader lunged first, throwing a powerful punch. Amanda sidestepped smoothly, countering with a sharp strike to his ribs. He grunted but recovered quickly, swinging again with more force. The two engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Amanda's smaller frame gave her an advantage in agility, allowing her to evade the leader's heavy blows while landing calculated strikes. The leader, however, was relentless. He grabbed Amanda by the arm, attempting to throw her off balance, but she twisted out of his grip and delivered a swift kick to his knee. He stumbled slightly but didn't fall, retaliating with a powerful strike that grazed her shoulder. You're good, he admitted, his breathing heavier now. But not good enough. Amanda smirked, wiping a trickle of blood from her lip. We'll see about that. With a sudden burst of speed, she feigned a low attack, drawing his guard down, before launching a spinning kick that connected squarely with his jaw. The force sent him sprawling to the ground. He tried to rise, but Amanda was on him in an instant. She pinned him with a precise hold, locking his arm and immobilizing him. It's over, she said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. The remaining attackers hesitated, their leader's defeat breaking their resolve. The agents seized the opportunity, moving in swiftly to disarm and subdue the rest of the group. Within minutes, the chaos subsided. The attackers were restrained, their weapons confiscated, and the area secured. Amanda released the leader, who was now cuffed and glaring at her with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. You got lucky, he muttered. No, Amanda replied coldly. You got outmatched. As the agents regrouped, Reeves approached Amanda. Good work, but we've got a problem. Amanda's brow furrowed. What is it? Intel just came through, Reeves said, holding up a tablet. Another convoy is headed our way, heavily armed. Amanda's jaw tightened. Then we hold the line. The sound of engines in the distance signaled the arrival of the next wave, pushing the team to prepare for another battle. The low rumble of engines grew louder, signaling the approach of another convoy. Amanda Carter crouched behind the SUV, her focus razor-sharp. Through the smoke and debris of the previous firefight, the faint outlines of armored vehicles emerged. These weren't ordinary trucks. They were heavily modified, their frames reinforced and weapons mounted. Armored vehicles incoming, Reeves called out over the comms. 3, maybe 4. They're escalating, Amanda said, her tone grim. We hold them off. No retreat. The trucks roared into the perimeter, their mounted guns unleashing a barrage of heavy fire that shredded the nearby cover. The agents scattered, moving tactically to avoid the onslaught. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the SUVs, and chunks of asphalt erupted from the ground. Reeves tapped into his comm. Deploy drones. We need eyes in the air and countermeasures now. A sharp beep confirmed the command, and moments later, 2 compact drones buzzed into the sky. Their cameras provided a bird's-eye view of the battlefield, pinpointing the attackers' positions. Targets identified, an agent reported. Their lead vehicle has a mounted cannon. We'll need EMPs to neutralize it. Amanda nodded. On it. Cover me. She darted from her position, weaving through the hail of gunfire. Grabbing a small cylindrical device from her tactical belt, she armed the EMP grenade and lobbed it toward the lead vehicle. It landed perfectly, releasing a high-pitched whine before detonating. The blast sent a wave of electromagnetic energy rippling outward. The mounted cannon sparked and went dead, its operator cursing as the truck's systems failed. Good hit, Reeves called out. But we've got 2 more still active. Behind the agent's position, Harris had taken cover near his patrol car. His hands trembled as he clutched his sidearm, the chaos of the fight rendering him nearly paralyzed. He peeked out briefly, only to duck back as a bullet shattered the windshield of his car. You're useless like this, Amanda shouted over her shoulder, noticing him frozen in place. Harris swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the gun. I can help, he shouted back. Then prove it, Amanda snapped. Take the shot when you have it. At that moment, one of the attackers began flanking the agents, moving stealthily along the side of the trucks with a rifle trained on Amanda. Harris spotted the movement and raised his weapon, his heart pounding. His first shot went wide, missing the target by inches. The attacker turned toward him, raising his weapon. Harris inhaled sharply, steadied his hand, and fired again. This time the bullet hit its mark, dropping the attacker instantly. Amanda glanced back, her expression a mix of surprise and approval. "Good shot," she called out. "Now keep it up." The armored vehicles adjusted their strategy, two of them splitting off to circle the agent's position. One truck unleashed a volley of explosives, sending shock waves through the ground and forcing the agents to reposition. "Second EMP ready," Reeves reported. "Deploy it," Amanda ordered. Another agent threw the device, landing it beneath the second truck. The pulse disabled its weapon systems, leaving the vehicle vulnerable. Amanda capitalized on the moment, firing a precise shot through the windshield, taking out the driver. The truck veered off course and slammed into a ditch, its engine smoking. The third vehicle pressed forward, its reinforced frame deflecting most of the agent's gunfire. It stopped just short of the convoy, its rear doors swinging open to reveal a team of attackers armed with rocket launchers. "Take out that launcher!" Amanda shouted. Harris, emboldened by his earlier success, aimed at the operator preparing the rocket. His shot struck the man in the shoulder, causing him to drop the launcher. An agent quickly followed up, neutralizing the remaining attackers before they could regroup. Reeves directed the drones to the final vehicle, marking its weak points. "We've got an exposed fuel tank," he reported. "Take the shot," Amanda ordered. Another agent lined up the shot with precision, firing into the truck's undercarriage. The explosion rocked the battlefield, flames engulfing the last of the attackers' reinforcements. As the smoke cleared, the remaining attackers threw down their weapons, raising their hands in surrender. The agents moved swiftly, securing the area and restraining the surviving combatants. Harris slumped against his patrol car, his breathing heavy. The adrenaline coursing through him began to fade, replaced by a weighty realization of what had just transpired. Amanda approached him, her expression unreadable. "You held your own out there," she said simply. Harris looked up at her, his face pale. "I didn't think I could," he admitted. "You didn't have a choice," Amanda replied. "But this isn't over for you." Reeves joined them, his tablet in hand. "Area secured, but we've got intel suggesting another wave might be inbound. We need to move." Amanda nodded. "Let's pack up and go. Leave nothing behind." As the team prepared to leave, Harris lingered, knowing that while the battle was over, his reckoning had just begun. The last of the attackers were being restrained and loaded into unmarked vehicles. The air was thick with the scent of burnt rubber and smoldering debris as Amanda Carter and her team prepared to leave the scene. Amanda strode toward Harris, who leaned heavily against his patrol car, his face pale and his hands still trembling. His earlier bravado had been stripped away, leaving only a man grappling with the weight of his choices. "This is where we part ways, Officer Harris," Amanda said, her voice cold but steady. "But before we do, I'll give you one piece of advice." Harris looked up at her, his jaw tightening. "Next time you flash that badge," she continued, "think about whether you're protecting people or just wielding power to feel important. You almost got yourself, and everyone else here, killed tonight because you couldn't handle the idea of someone being out of your control." Harris's fists clenched, but he didn't respond. Amanda stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "You think you're the authority here? You're not. And if you don't learn that fast, you'll find yourself in situations much worse than this." With that, she turned away, giving a nod to Reeves. "Let's move." The black SUVs, now carrying the secured black case, roared to life and disappeared into the night, leaving Harris alone on the desolate road with the remnants of his shattered pride. Harris returned to the station hours later, his patrol car barely making it back. The fluorescent lights of the precinct felt harsh against his exhausted eyes as he pushed through the glass doors. A few officers looked up from their desks, their faces a mixture of curiosity and irritation. "Rough night?" one of them asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Harris didn't reply, trudging to his desk. He barely had time to sit before the voice of his captain boomed from across the room. "Harris, my office. Now." The captain's tone left no room for argument. Harris dragged himself to his feet and entered the office, closing the door behind him. Sit, the captain barked, slamming a file down on his desk. What the hell happened out there? Harris hesitated, his eyes darting to the file. It was already filled with preliminary reports, likely sent over by the federal agents. You're lucky they didn't arrest you on the spot, the captain continued, his face red with anger. Chasing a federal operation without clearance? Obstructing their mission? Do you have any idea how close you came to a complete disaster? They weren't transparent, Harris protested weakly. I thought— You thought what? The captain interrupted. That you could handle this on your own? That your gut instinct was enough to justify putting lives at risk? Harris's shoulders slumped. He didn't have an answer. The captain leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. You've embarrassed this department, and more importantly, you've endangered the very people you're supposed to protect. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave pending a full review of your conduct. Harris's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood. The rest of the night was a blur. Harris sat in the station's break room, staring blankly at the vending machine as the weight of his captain's words sank in. For years, he had operated under the belief that his badge was a shield of unquestionable authority, but tonight had shattered that illusion. He thought back to Amanda's words, her piercing gaze cutting through his defenses. She was right. He had let his ego drive his decisions, prioritizing his need for control over his duty to protect. It wasn't just about tonight. He replayed past encounters in his mind, moments where he had asserted his authority simply because he could, not because it was necessary. The pattern was undeniable, and the realization hit him like a freight train. He had failed to uphold the very principles his badge stood for. As the sun began to rise, Harris made a decision. He wasn't going to let this define him. He needed to take accountability, not just for the night's events, but for the mindset that had led him there. Harris walked back into the captain's office, his steps deliberate. The captain looked up surprised. You've got something to say? Yes, Harris replied, his voice steady. I want to file a full report on everything that happened tonight. Every mistake I made, every order I disregarded. No excuses. The captain studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. All right, let's hear it. Harris took a seat, exhaling deeply. For the first time, he was ready to face the consequences, not out of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. Harris began recounting the night's events in painstaking detail, determined to take the first step toward change, no matter how difficult it would be. Inside the lead SUV, Amanda Carter sat in the back seat, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the tactical tablet in her hands. The screen displayed real-time data from the incident, attacker profiles, vehicle trajectories, and comm logs. Despite the mission's success, the tension in the vehicle was palpable. Reeves, sitting beside her, broke the silence. That was too close. Amanda didn't look up. It shouldn't have gotten that far, she said flatly. We had the situation contained until Harris decided to inject himself into something he didn't understand. Reeves nodded, his jaw tight. A local officer, drunk on power, nearly derailed a federal operation. If that convoy had breached us, the fallout would have been catastrophic. Amanda leaned back, letting out a slow breath. Harris isn't unique, she said. There are too many like him. People who let their authority blind them to the bigger picture. He wasn't just a nuisance tonight. He was a liability. Another agent in the front seat turned slightly. We neutralized the immediate threat, but we can't ignore the risks. If that black case had been compromised, the intel inside could have destabilized everything we've been working toward. Amanda's voice hardened. Which is exactly why we need stricter protocols when dealing with local enforcement. Next time, we won't be so lucky. The vehicle hit a smooth stretch of road, and Amanda tapped her earpiece. Status on the convoy? A voice came through, crisp and professional. All vehicles are en route. The package is secure. Estimated arrival at the transfer site in 20 minutes. Good, Amanda replied. She turned to Reeves. Get a full report on the attackers. I want to know who financed them and how they knew about the case. Reeves nodded and began typing on his tablet. Already cross-referencing with known groups. Preliminary data suggests a mercenary outfit, highly skilled but lacking coordination. They were likely hired by someone with deeper pockets and bigger ambitions. Amanda's expression darkened, which means this won't end here. Reeves looked at her, his tone cautious. You think there's another play coming? Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. There's always another play. Tonight was a test. Whoever sent them wanted to see how far they could push us, how we'd respond. Now they'll regroup and escalate. Reeves frowned. Then we need to escalate first. The convoy pulled into a secure facility, a nondescript warehouse surrounded by tall fencing and heavy surveillance. The agents moved swiftly, transferring the black case to a reinforced vault deep within the structure. Amanda oversaw the handoff personally, ensuring the chain of custody remained intact. Package secure, one of the agents confirmed, closing the vault door with a resounding clang. Amanda nodded. Good. I want a 24-hour watch on this site. No one in or out without my clearance. As the team regrouped in the facility's briefing room, Amanda took the lead. Let's go over the night's events, she said, her tone brisk. Reeves brought up a map of the ambush site on a large screen. Red markers highlighted key positions where the attackers had advanced. We identified 3 main weaknesses in their approach, Reeves began. Their vehicles were heavily armed, but their coordination was sloppy. They underestimated our countermeasures and didn't anticipate our drones neutralizing their flanking units. Amanda interrupted. What about the timing? How did they know to strike when they did? Reeves exchanged a glance with another agent. Still under investigation, but it's possible they had eyes on us during the transfer. If that's the case, we've got a leak somewhere. The room fell silent for a moment. Amanda's gaze swept over the team. If there's a leak, we find it. Fast. Until then, we operate under the assumption that every move we make is being watched. One of the agents hesitated before speaking. And Harris? Amanda's expression didn't change. He's irrelevant now. His interference was reckless, but it's handled. The real threat is out there, waiting for another opportunity. That's where our focus needs to be. Reeves cleared his throat. We'll need to brief the higher-ups on this. They'll want an immediate action plan. Amanda nodded. We'll brief them, but not before we have answers. Get me everything on the attackers, where they came from, who funded them, and why they were so desperate to get that case. As the team dispersed, Amanda lingered in the room, staring at the map on the screen. She replayed the night's events in her mind, noting every critical moment where things could have gone wrong. She tapped her comm again. I want every detail from tonight compiled and cross-referenced. If there's even a hint of another operation like this, I want to know before it happens. Yes, ma'am, came the response. Reeves stepped back into the room. This isn't the first time we've had to deal with interference like Harris, he said. Amanda didn't look at him. And it won't be the last. Reeves folded his arms. You think this kind of thing is preventable? No, Amanda said simply, but it's manageable. We can't stop people like Harris from acting out of ego or ignorance, but we can make sure that when they do, it doesn't derail what matters. Reeves nodded slowly. Let's hope next time we don't have to clean up after them. Amanda finally turned to face him, her gaze steady. There's always a next time, Reeves. It's our job to be ready for it. As Amanda left the room, the weight of the night lingered. Harris sat stiffly in the chair across from his captain, the walls of the office closing in like the weight of his own choices. The captain's expression was hard, his hands folded tightly on the desk in front of him. You've got one chance to explain yourself, the captain said, his voice low and sharp, and I suggest you make it count. Harris exhaled, forcing himself to meet his superior's gaze. I messed up, he said simply, his tone steady despite the turmoil inside. I acted out of ego instead of judgment. I let my authority blind me to the bigger picture, and it almost cost lives. The captain's eyebrow arched, but he remained silent, waiting for Harris to continue. I assumed I had everything under control, Harris went on, but the truth is, I didn't even understand what I was stepping into. I let my need to feel in charge override what I've been trained to do, protect and serve. The captain leaned back in his chair, studying Harris with a skeptical eye. And why should I believe that you've learned anything from this? Harris's jaw tightened. Because I'm not asking for a second chance to make excuses. I'm asking for the tools to make sure this doesn't happen again. The captain frowned. Tools? I want to enroll in advanced training, Harris said firmly. Cultural sensitivity, de-escalation tactics, anything that'll help me understand how to handle situations like this the right way. I don't want to be the kind of cop who escalates things because of my own insecurities. The captain leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. You're asking for training to fix a problem you created with sheer arrogance. You think that's going to make up for the damage you've done to this department's reputation? Harris swallowed hard. No, he admitted, but it's a start. The captain stared at him for a long moment, the silence heavy. Finally, he let out a long sigh. If I approve this, there's no room for failure, Harris. You screw up again, even once, and you're out. You understand that? Yes, sir, Harris said without hesitation. The captain shook his head. I hope you mean it. You're not just on thin ice. You're standing on a puddle. The next day, Harris stood in the precinct's training room, a mandatory session already underway. A facilitator at the front of the room spoke about implicit bias, challenging the officers to reflect on their decision-making processes. Harris sat silently, his arms crossed, but his mind churned. Implicit bias affects everyone, the facilitator said. The question is whether you're willing to confront it before it affects how you do your job. Harris shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He thought back to Amanda Carter's unwavering gaze, the way she dismantled his authority without raising her voice. She'd been right about him. He hadn't been protecting anyone that night. He'd been trying to assert control, to prove something, to himself, to her, to everyone watching. When the session ended, Harris approached the facilitator. I need more of this, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. The facilitator tilted her head. You mean more training? Yes, Harris replied. But not just that. I need to know how to fix the way I think about my role as a cop. I need to learn how to serve, not just enforce. The facilitator studied him for a moment before nodding. We have advanced courses. I'll make sure you're signed up. Thank you, Harris said, his voice firm. No. Weeks passed and Harris threw himself into the training. He attended every session, often staying afterward to ask questions or discuss scenarios. He learned about community policing, de-escalation techniques, and how to recognize and overcome his own biases. But the real change came when he started putting those lessons into practice. One evening while on patrol, Harris responded to a call about a suspicious individual loitering outside a convenience store. When he arrived, he saw a young man pacing nervously near the entrance, his hoodie pulled up over his head. The old Harris would have approached with his hand on his holster, demanding answers. This time, Harris took a breath and approached calmly. Hey, he said, his tone conversational. You all right? The young man looked up, startled. I'm just waiting for my sister, he mumbled. All right, Harris said, nodding. Mind if I wait with you until she shows up, just to make sure everything's okay? The young man blinked in surprise but nodded. Minutes later, a teenage girl emerged from the store, and the young man visibly relaxed. Thanks, officer, he said awkwardly. Harris smiled faintly. Take care of each other, he said before walking back to his car. It was a small moment, but it stuck with him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he'd done his job the right way, not as an enforcer, but as someone who genuinely cared about the people he served. Sitting alone in his car later that night, Harris thought back to the night with Amanda Carter. Her parting words echoed in his mind. Think about whether you're protecting people or just wielding power. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could choose to do better moving forward. Harris stared out at the quiet streets, realizing this wasn't just about his job. It was about who he wanted to be. For the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. The fallout from the incident spread like wildfire. Within days, local and national media picked up the story, framing it as another example of law enforcement overreach. Headlines dissected the events at the gas station and the highway ambush, zeroing in on Officer Harris's involvement. Local officer jeopardizes federal operation. When ego trumps duty, a small-town cop's reckless decisions. Footage from the Secret Service's cameras leaked online, sparking outrage. Clips of Harris demanding to see the case, Amanda's calm but cutting rebuttals, and the firefight with the attackers went viral. Social media exploded with opinions, both condemning Harris and calling for reforms in local policing. In town, the reaction was immediate. Community leaders organized public forums to discuss the implications of the incident. At one meeting, a local activist, Carla Monroe, stood before a packed room. "This isn't just about one officer," Carla said, her voice steady but passionate. "It's about a system that allows people like him to act without accountability. Harris isn't the first cop to overstep, but he can be the last if we demand change." The crowd murmured in agreement, their frustration palpable. At the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Harris could feel the eyes of his colleagues on him as he walked through the halls. Conversation stopped abruptly when he entered a room, and whispers followed him wherever he went. Captain Reese called a meeting to address the growing backlash. The officers gathered in the briefing room, their expressions a mix of defensiveness and unease. "The media storm isn't going away," Reese said bluntly. "And it's not just Harris in the spotlight. It's all of us. This department needs to prove we can do better. Starting now." One officer raised his hand. "What about Harris? He's the one who caused this mess." Reese's eyes locked onto Harris. "He's taking steps to fix it," he said. "But that won't mean anything if the rest of us don't step up too. This isn't just his fight, it's ours." Harris shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew the captain was trying to protect the department's image, but the truth was, he deserved the scrutiny. The next day, Harris attended a community forum. It was his choice, not an order, and he knew he'd face tough questions. The room was packed, with locals lining the walls. Harris sat in the back, watching as speaker after speaker voiced their concerns. "We trust our police to protect us," an older woman said, her voice trembling. "But how can we feel safe when they act like this?" Another man stood. "This isn't just about that one night. It's about how cops treat people every day. They think their badge makes them untouchable." Finally, Harris stood, his presence drawing sharp stares from the crowd. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't expect forgiveness," he began, his voice steady but low. "And I'm not here to make excuses. What I did that night was wrong. I acted out of arrogance, not duty, and it almost cost lives." The room was silent, the tension thick. "I've spent weeks thinking about what I could have done differently," Harris continued. "And the truth is, it wasn't just one bad decision. It was a pattern, a way of thinking that I'd fallen into without realizing it. I let my badge define me instead of the responsibility that comes with it." A woman in the front row folded her arms. "So what are you going to do about it?" Harris met her gaze. "I'm already doing it. I've started advanced training to address my biases, learn de-escalation tactics, and focus on serving, not controlling. But I know actions speak louder than words. All I can do is keep showing up and doing better." As the weeks passed, the community's anger began to shift toward action. Inspired by the incident, local leaders pushed for reforms. The department announced new policies emphasizing accountability, including mandatory body cameras and regular training on implicit bias and conflict resolution. Carla Monroe, who had been one of Harris's sharpest critics, approached him after another forum. "I'll admit, I didn't think you'd stick around," Carla said, her tone guarded. "I almost didn't," Harris replied. "But walking away would have just proved you right." Carla studied him for a moment. "It's going to take more than words to fix what's broken," she said. "I know," Harris said, "but I'm in it for the long haul." The media eventually moved on, but the impact of the story lingered. Harris became a reluctant symbol of both failure and the potential for redemption. Some in the community remained skeptical, while others cautiously supported his efforts to change. At the precinct, Harris began to rebuild trust with his colleagues. He volunteered for community outreach programs and partnered with officers who shared his commitment to doing better. Slowly, the divide between the department and the community began to narrow. One evening, Harris patrolled the streets, his cruiser moving through a quiet neighborhood. He passed a group of kids playing basketball and slowed to a stop. "Need a referee?" he called out, stepping out of the car. The kids laughed, and one of them tossed him the ball. Harris played for a while, the weight of the past weeks momentarily lifting. As he drove away later, he thought back to the night at the gas station. He knew he'd never fully escape the shadow of his mistakes, but he also knew he had a choice, to let it define him or to use it as a foundation for change. The secured convoy sped down an empty road, its destination classified, its mission far from over. Amanda Carter sat in the back of the lead SUV, her tactical gear still dusty from the night's chaos. She scrolled through reports on a tablet, her focus sharp, but her mind drifted to the figure of Officer Harris. Reeves, seated beside her, glanced over. Still thinking about him? Amanda nodded slightly. He could have ruined everything, she said, but maybe he learned something. People like that don't usually change, Reeves replied. Some do, Amanda countered. And when they do, it matters, Reeves shrugged. He's not our problem anymore. Let's just hope he stays out of our way next time. Amanda didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Next time, she muttered, her tone thoughtful. Back in his small town, Harris walked into the precinct with a new resolve. The weight of the past weeks had shifted from shame to determination. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for the way he approached his role as an officer. His colleagues watched him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism as he entered the morning briefing. Captain Reese gestured for silence as he addressed the team. We've all seen the fallout from Harris's actions, Reese began, and we've all had to answer tough questions because of it. But I'll say this, he's owned up to his mistakes, and he's taking the steps to do better. That's more than most people would do. Reese turned to Harris. You've got a long road ahead, but you've got a chance to make this right. Don't waste it. Harris nodded firmly. I won't, sir. After the meeting, Harris approached Officer Martinez, one of his peers who had been openly critical of him since the incident. I know I've lost your trust, Harris said, but I want to earn it back. Martinez crossed his arms. Talk is cheap, Harris. You want to prove yourself? Show me. I will, Harris promised. Weeks turned into months, and Harris threw himself into his new approach. He spent time listening to community members, attending neighborhood meetings, and learning from the very people he once overlooked. On patrol, he prioritized de-escalation, making every effort to resolve situations without force. One evening, Harris responded to a call about a domestic disturbance. When he arrived, he found a tense standoff between a landlord and a tenant. The landlord, a middle-aged man, gestured angrily. He hasn't paid rent in months. I'm calling the sheriff. The tenant, a younger man, looked cornered and defensive. I just need more time. My hours got cut at work. The old Harris might have sided with authority and escalated the conflict. Instead, he listened carefully to both sides, mediating a compromise that gave the tenant more time to catch up on payments while assuring the landlord that his property would be respected. Afterward, the landlord shook Harris's hand. Thanks for handling that calmly, he said. The tenant nodded. Yeah, you didn't have to do that, but you did. Harris felt a small glimmer of pride. It wasn't flashy, but it was meaningful, a reminder of why he'd become an officer in the first place. Far away, Amanda sat in a sterile conference room, a map of international hotspots spread out before her. The next mission loomed, and the stakes were higher than ever. But for a moment, her mind returned to Harris. Do you really think he'll change? Reeves asked, breaking her concentration. I don't know, Amanda admitted, but he's trying, and that's more than most people do when they're forced to confront their mistakes. Reeves smirked. You've got more faith in him than I do. Amanda gave a faint smile. Maybe, or maybe I've just seen enough people change to know it's possible. Months later, Harris received an email from a federal liaison. It was marked urgent, and as he opened it, his heart skipped a beat. Subject, federal collaboration opportunity. The email outlined a joint task force initiative designed to improve coordination between local and federal law enforcement. To his surprise, the liaison mentioned Amanda Carter as one of the program's advisors. Harris read the email twice, the weight of its implications settling in. On the other side of the country, Amanda scanned a similar document. She smirked when she saw Harris's name among the potential collaborators. Looks like we might cross paths again, Reeves commented, reading over her shoulder. Amanda shrugged. If we do, let's hope it's on the same side this time. And so the story of Amanda and Harris leaves us with a powerful reminder. Change is possible, but it demands effort, accountability, and the courage to face one's flaws. From a clash of egos to a potential partnership, this journey shows that even the most fractured paths can lead to redemption if the will is strong enough. What do you think? Can someone like Harris truly transform and earn back trust? Or are some mistakes too great to overcome? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping narratives and thought-provoking discussions. Your support helps us bring you the stories that matter.